Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I am ready to do my full review on the Spyderco Pochi. This knife is a joke. I talked about it in my first impressions. The reason why I own this knife is because it's a joke. This knife is purely for comedy to me. Let me start off right now by saying if you're looking for a review to justify in any kind of rational way the purchase of this knife as a tool to be used for knife things, you've come to the wrong place. I will not be justifying it for anything of the such. I think this is a terrible knife, as knives go, when you look at them in their simplistic form of being designed to be held in hand and cut things. This is one of the worst that I've experienced. But this knife is a joke, so we're going to talk about why it's funny and why... we'll also talk about what I've found with it. I have tried using this knife a little bit. I've tried carrying this knife a little bit. If I'm going to be honest, usually when I do a full review on a knife, I've made sure that I carried the knife at least 5 or 6 times over the span of at least a week. Sometimes it takes me longer lately with how many knives I'm trying to get through. But this knife I've probably carried 3 times. Maybe 4. I think I've carried it 3 times in pocket, and then once or twice I've tossed it into my fanny pack. In terms of cutting, I have done a little bit of cutting with this knife. I've opened some packaging. I've cut a couple of zip ties, like inside of like Barbies and stuff. And I tried processing a little cardboard with it. It worked to an extent, but I ended up switching knives because I had a lot to actually get done and I didn't have the patience to deal with this for it. And I think that's about it. I don't think there's anything else I've realistically cut with the Pochi. So that's what I'm coming at this one from. It's a small knife and I have a small amount of experience with it compared to others. So if you're not familiar with the Pochi yet, this is one of the newest releases from Spyderco as of when I'm filming this video, and it is a knife that they designed with, I believe he's a Japanese designer, who I'm not familiar with at all. I don't know his other work. Apparently, from what I've been told, he designs a lot of animal-themed knives. This one is designed to be a dog. This is a dog knife. It has a titanium tail that runs on phosphor bronze washers. It has a frame lock body that results in these back legs and some kind of stripes on top with that milling. And then it has what you would think would be a flipper tab, but does not reliably flip the knife. In fact, it doesn't. Not even reliably. It just doesn't flip the knife. And that turns into the guard and front legs. And then we have this crazy clip point, kind of Bowie-shaped blade. And it's all belly. It's a hollow grind. And it's S45 VN blade steel. So we have titanium frame and frame lock. We have a big pivot collar because dogs have collars. We have a pocket clip with a literal paw print on it. And yeah, that pivot collar also functions as the over travel stop. There is no stainless steel insert on here. So that's what we're dealing with construction wise, right? I think I already mentioned. The tail is titanium and runs on phosphor bronze washers. So this being a tiny little frame lock, functionally as a knife, it is just not very good. The Pochi is just not a good knife. If you, like I said from the very beginning, if you're looking for a knife to do things knives are supposed to do, I do not advise this at all. But do I regret spending like $180 of my own money on this knife? Not really. Because I happen to think knives are fun. Knives are like the most fun thing in my life. They're my hobby. They're what I enjoy, right? And this is just enjoyable to laugh at, make jokes about, show to people. It is worth it for the reactions to me. It's just fun to have around. Will I keep this knife for forever? Probably not. I don't know how long it's justifiable. I don't know what kind of hit I'll take on the secondary. I don't know. Maybe I'll get lucky and these will all be sold out and someone will really want one. I'll be able to sell it for what I paid for it. I don't know. But I don't think I'll keep this knife forever. Maybe I will. Maybe it's funny enough that I will, but time will tell on that one. So let's talk about the typical things I talk about in a review to illustrate why this knife is not a real knife, in my opinion, and then we'll just see where it goes from there. So let's talk about ergos. Ergonomically, this knife has some issues. The biggest among them is that it is tiny. It is a very, very small knife. So for me, I realistically get 2 fingers here in this kind of belly groove thing, like if I'm tickling its tummy, I get just a little bit of room in here. So I can almost get 3, like if I held it with this part of my fingers, I could get 3, but if I put it where I actually want to put a knife, they're way too cramped, and it's uncomfortable, just doesn't really work. So I like to put 2 fingers in there, and then I hang the other 2 back here. You're supposed to use the tail, supposedly, as like a stabilizer and an extra little bit to grip onto. I find that it just feels weird and funky and doesn't give me any extra dexterity on the knife, so I keep it folded in if I'm actually planning to use the knife. So I do kind of a saber grip where I push my thumb all the way up to here, or even sometimes up to here depending on what I'm cutting. Not that I've, like I said, cut very much stuff with it, but usually kind of right back here, and I kind of push the knife forward. I've got my 2 fingers in here, kind of kinked into the back there, and I just hang on for dear life. Even that, like bearing down in this way that I've found is most comfortable for me, just does not feel like I've got enough to hold on to. And what I am holding on to feels smooth, it's not textured anywhere, and it's just not comfortable. It's not trying to like cut me anywhere. It's not super hot spotty or anything like that. It's more like the whole thing is a hot spot. Like, my hand's a lot more comfortable just not holding on to this. There are some knives that I put into my hands, like, here's a great example, the Koenig Arius, where when I hold on to a Koenig Arius, I feel like this knife, it's more comfortable for me to grip down onto this knife than to like make a fist with nothing in my hand. It's just like molded. It's like I've taken a piece of clay that I've gripped down on, and it has filled my hand perfectly. That's what some knives feel like. This doesn't feel like that at all. It feels really quite awkward and annoying to hold on to. I don't like the ergos one bit. So ergonomically, big, big, big fail. Let's talk about action next. Like I said in the beginning, this looks like a flipper tab. On every other knife, that is a flipper tab, right? But here, apparently, it's just a front leg for standing the knife up for pictures. It does not work as a flipper tab. If I give it a wrist, I can do it, but I gotta like really fling it. That's not how a flipper tab is supposed to work, so I don't count that. This is not good. Not good at all. Now if I get it just right, and I position my hand well, so I like have a crazy weird grip on this tiny thing right now, I can middle finger flick it. It'll work, barely. But that's not a good, I mean, I shouldn't have to like contort the knife into this weird stabilized position in my hand. Like when I middle finger flick a PM2, it's just the easiest thing in the world. It feels more natural to me than using my thumb to open the knife. This needs to be lubed. But it's just simple, easy, it works. Here I have to like create this weird like hand system where I'm getting everything lined up just right and pinching it in this strange way, and then it goes. It's not good. And then on closing, holy, it's rough. I have not lubed this, I haven't disassembled it, I haven't tried to tune it, because I don't care. Even if this action got really good, there would be enough else wrong with this knife that I still would not love the knife. So maybe I could improve the action. I haven't even tried yet, but it's gritty, it's pretty rough, it's not a good action. Let's talk about carry for a moment. This knife is teensy tiny, right? It's just a little baby puppy knife. So it will go in my fifth pocket without the clip. If I just toss it in my fifth pocket, that's fine. That is the best way to carry this knife, in my opinion. Anytime I've tried using the clip, it will clip onto things, but it is really tight. Like a lot of tension, and there's not much room underneath it. It reminds me of one of the worst clips that Spyderco's made, being the drunken clip, in terms of like the construction of it and how it's mounted on there and how much is underneath it. Plus it does this like curve thing. It's just not a good pocket clip. It's not. Which, like, it's got to be kind of a challenge to build a pocket clip that will fit on a knife this tiny, and then you want to add a paw print onto it. It's just not a good clip. Doesn't work well. It will go into a pocket, or onto a pocket, I should say, but it's uncomfortable to put in and out of pocket, and then you have this paw print, which some people might love. I do not. So if you're tossing this in a fifth pocket, it'll carry like the tiny little knife that it is. There's no getting around that. It's tiny. So if you're looking for a knife that will fit in your fifth pocket, this fits in that category. But see all the other categories to see why it sucks. Plus, the pocket clip sucks. I think even a good fifth pocket knife, unless it has no pocket clip, should have a pocket clip that works pretty well. This one does not work well at all. Alright, so the only other category that I usually talk about that's left here is cutting. Now, this blade with this hollow grind is actually reasonably thin right behind the edge, although it gets thick quick because it is a tiny, tiny little hollow grind. If you look at how tall that hollow grind is, it is stubby, right? So it's kind of a deep hollow to remove material quick. It's got a very pokey little tip on it, but I have found that because this hollow is so abrupt, it's actually not that great at cutting through stuff continuously. Like going through tape and whatever, I've had some really thick behind the edge knives that'll go through tape because that's more about the actual edge itself. But when I've like pushed through cardboard with this, it's not like a slicey little blade. The Dragonfly that I'm working on reviewing right now is a 10 times better slicer than this is, and more comfortable to carry, and actually has a better action than this, even though it's a backlock. Like, it's unacceptable here. But anyways, this type of grind, I like hollow grinds a lot of the time. I know quite a few people who aren't super fond of them, unless they're done like pretty tall and like not very deep, just kind of like a muted hollow. But this is just one of those cases where like I agree with people who are not into hollow grinds, because it just doesn't work very well here. It's too stubby of a grind, if that makes sense. Oh my goodness. Why? There we go. That must have been frustrating to watch. So, this knife is not a very good cutter, not only because you just don't have very much edge anyways, but also because of the type of grind that's on here. The ergos are very not confidence inspiring, which doesn't help it in the cutting category. Ergonomically, it just sucks. The pocket clip is bad. The action is terrible. It's not a good knife. Now, what it's good at is one thing. Only one thing. It's good at looking like a puppy. It stands up like a puppy. It has a tail like a puppy. Kind of has an eye like a puppy, I guess. It looks like a puppy. Mission accomplished. They made a knife that looks like a puppy. That's it. They didn't make a knife that otherwise is good at anything, in my opinion. And that's what makes it so funny. Like, it really genuinely is. From the moment that I saw when they unveiled this knife with like their catalog of knife releases or whatever that they do every quarter or so, when I saw this one, I started laughing because it looked comical. And then especially when I looked at the size of it, like the dimensions and how big it was going to be, or rather how tiny it is, it's like, it's hilarious. This cannot really be considered much of an actual knife. And the fact that, like, Spyderco is capable of making very small knives that function really well. There's the Dragonfly, there's the Lil Native. The McBee is a tiny knife that I think, for how tiny it is acceptable in terms of its level of performance. This is just not one of those cases. They prioritized making it a dog. And I don't know. Maybe if you tried to make a bigger dog knife, you could make it work. If you stretched it to a bigger footprint, I don't know. But at this point, I don't think, if you're looking into designing knives, if you want to make high performance knives that work well, don't start by trying to make them look like a dog. This gives me no faith in that method. It's just not a good knife. But it is a funny little dog-shaped item that you can have that is laughably expensive for being an unfunctional dog figurine. Like it's like a figurine with an edge on it. That's the way I have to look at it. So is it hilarious? Yes. It's very funny to me that they even did this. That Spyderco would make this is comical. And so I'm glad that I have a piece of the comedy. I've got one. I have one here that I can laugh at, and I can show it to people and they can laugh at. It's hilarious. But no, it's not a knife. It's a figurine. So, I guess that'll be my full review on the Pochi. Probably sounded a little harsh. I kind of felt a little bit like I was holding back in terms of talking about its performance. It's really bad. Just not acceptable at being a knife. So, there's your review. I guess that'll be what it's going to be. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one.